The Centre presents a new podcast, CBME and You, a podcast devoted to promoting awareness and debate around controversial ethical issues in biomedicine.
Welcome back to CBME and You, a podcast about biomedical ethics. Today, we talk about disgust. Does it play a role in bioethics? Can it tell us anything about controversial practices like cloning? And why is deep dish pizza so gross? Joining us today is Brandon Yip, Assistant Professor of Philosophy at the Singapore Management University School of Social Sciences. Welcome, Brandon.
Thanks for having me.
I always love it when we throw it to them straight away and they're like, thanks.
It's like, wait a minute, saying thanks is not a part of the script. You didn't send me this. Next time we'll put it in. We'll be like, Brandon or guest, thanks.
Welcome, Brandon. First question for you, coffee or copy?
Yeah, so that's a great, I'm not sure if it's a great question actually, but
it's relevant.
So
actually not much.
I'm not really, I enjoy the taste of coffee, but it's not, I know many people, they need coffee every day. I'm not that sort of person. And I think my tastes are pretty basic. I'm okay with anything, as long as there's lots of milk in it. So a kopi C or a latte would be fine. I mean, there are some standards, right? I think I wouldn't take anything worse than Ya-Kun for kopi. I wouldn't get kopi from the food court.
What do you think about cappuccino?
I don't usually drink a cappuccino. I think it's fine.
That's the perfect answer.
Yeah.
Again, you're wrong.
Yeah.
So would you classify yourself as a latte girly then?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Episode titled Disgust with Latte Girly.
I don't think he has a negative opinion towards cappuccinos.
Well, he just said he doesn't drink them. So
I usually drink lattes.
You know the difference between a cappuccino and a latte.
Well, not precisely. I only know that the latte has more milk than a cappuccino.
Well, that's more than what you knew, so that's okay. We're good.
I knew that.
James thinks I'm a bit of a coffee snob.
Yeah. Okay.
I just think he told me the story once, which is that when he went out to have coffee for the very first time, the person in front of him ordered a cappuccino, and so he went with that, and he's stuck with it ever since. And I think that's irrational.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've met real coffee snobs. They would not drink coffee with any kind of milk in it at all. It's usually like the... Oh,
See?
you know what?
Not a coffee snob.
Yeah.
Waikong is like, yes.
Okay, fine. You're snobbish.
All right. Now, what country would you like to travel to next?
Right. Great question. Again, I have very basic tastes. So actually, like my wife, Yusha, and I have been talking about going to Japan actually for the last 5 years.
Knew it.
And
first guess.
well, there was COVID, and then we had a kid, so that traveling, it's been made a bit difficult. But we're actually finally going there at the end of the year, so I'm really looking forward to that.
Oh, how exciting!
Yeah, it's just a nice place with great food. I enjoy the food there. It's clean, and I think there are great things to see as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, what's your go-to karaoke song?
Yeah, so actually I've been to karaoke with James, so
we have.
Really?
Yeah, we've done karaoke together.
So he might know my tastes, but it's kind of strange. I actually enjoy singing old Disney songs.
Yes. All right, let's go.
I'm more of a ballad guy, so if I had to pick, I'd say "Part of Your World" from The Little Mermaid.
What a legend!
Excellent. Yeah, very good.
How do we feel about "I'll Make a Man Out of You"? Is that up there in top 3?
Well, it's not a ballad.
How do we define a ballad? You know what? That's a different podcast.
Yeah, I think it's like slow-ish and also very emotional.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's a fun song for sure.
Yeah. What other ballads in Disney are there?
I Can Show You the World.
Oh,
I love ballad.
Yeah.
Reflections.
Oh yeah, Reflection. No, I like that.
Yeah.
Reflections is a banger.
Yeah.
I've also heard you sing Colors of the Wind.
Okay.
That also counts as a ballad.
What?
Yeah, although it's not about romance. Yeah.
Let's do that. Let's go out for karaoke and start with Colours of the Wind. It's been too long for me.
Right.
It has not for me.
Oh, we know.
It's almost like a bi-weekly activity. Anyway. Okay. Let's talk about disgust. Now, so we all know that you're very interested in disgust and what disgust has to do with morality, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is interesting because the most obvious feeling of disgust is that kind of physical sensation that we get when confronted with something disgusting, something gross, like, seeing somebody vomit or seeing poop in the wrong place.
Yeah.
So what does this have to do with morality? Isn't disgustingness just disgustingness?
I should say being a father, and I guess I think there are some empirical studies, but when you do get a kid, your disgust sensitivity actually goes down because you have to deal with poop so much. But anyway, I think that's a great question. So I should say that in my work, I do draw a distinction between two forms of revulsion, what's often called core disgust and moral disgust. I mainly focus on moral disgust. But I think before turning to moral disgust, I think it's worth noticing that even core disgust is actually more entangled in the social world than we might first assume. So I think here's a fun little experiment that the listeners can try. So spit into a glass.
He brought experiments.
And then try to swallow the spit back.
Oh.
I think most people find that disgusting.
Yeah, cannot.
Yeah.
But with a straw.
Oh, it's even better with a straw. So it might lead you to think that, disgust tracks these simple physical boundaries like inside versus outside. But now, again, you can imagine, or again, if you could try, if you're in the right position at home, you can try kissing your romantic partner, having some of their saliva enter your mouth. Most people find that feels entirely different. Most wouldn't find it disgusting. Many find it pleasurable. I think it suggests that the boundaries that core disgust responds to are not simple physical boundaries, but social ones, right? Social categories of what's inside and outside. In fact, there's a recent paper in the journal Science, which is a famous journal, just to boost my credentials. I'm not just...
yes, I know the journal Science.
So,
what's it about? Is it
science?
Wow.
Right. So in this paper, it shows that actually young children infer social relationships between people based on whether they share saliva or not through food or utensils. Just think about your own attitudes to people sharing food, right? Like among family or friends, no one really bats an eyelid. But if a stranger comes to eat your leftovers, I think most people find that repulsive, disgusting. So even core disgust, I think, polices social boundaries, not merely physical ones. But as I said, my main focus is on moral disgust. I study phenomenology, what it feels like, and I try to examine paradigm cases of moral disgust to make sense of the emotion, and I try to give the argument that moral disgust really alerts us to actions that undermine the normative structures that we value. So I'll just give a bit of example, right? So I guess to make that clear, think about playing a game of football. And there's some players, they suddenly start picking up the ball with your hands and fooling around. Some sense in which the practice breaks down. Even if I follow the rules, my actions no longer count as playing football in any meaningful sense. So there's a shared structure that gives our actions meaning. This shared structure is undermined. I think in the same way, our social lives really rely on shared norms, ideals of mutual respect, certain forms of hierarchies, civic or religious values. And these structures are fragile. They can come apart. They exist because we continue to uphold them, and they can be corroded by certain actions. And I think when someone is attuned to a particular social order and sees it threatened, moral disgust can arise in response. I think that's what moral disgust in particular has to do with morality.
I like your distinction between what I would have thought to just be physical disgust, which is just vomit is gross generally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it also applies to like your home toilet versus a public toilet.
Yeah.
Like I will hold it so that I can go home and use my own toilet.
Yeah.
And I share the toilet with my husband, and it's not like we share the same germs.
Yeah.
But I'm so much more likely to share my toilet with him because I just know him, even though it's not, biologically true that his germs are safer than some other stranger's germs.
That's right.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So just to, I guess, get our intuitions up and running.
Yeah.
Right. Could you give examples of certain kinds of moral transgressions which would create this kind of disgust, feelings of disgust, versus just, I guess, run-of-the-mill other transgressions which wouldn't create disgust?
Right. So, one way to answer that question is by giving sort of pure cases of moral disgust where it's a bit tricky because these two often run together. Think about the creep or, the person who goes around, like the molester or something, or someone goes around taking up skirts. I don't know why there are apparently lots of these in Singapore. I think these people, you could see that they are both like physically repulsive in some ways. I guess they do something that is associated with what's usually like physical contaminants. But on the other hand, I think they are morally repulsive as well. I think there could be pure cases. So there's a study betrayal, I think, is one of those things that you could think of as a pure moral case in the sense that there doesn't seem to be any of the usual physical revulsion type elicitors. And there's a study also in Science, the journal,
He's
by Hannah
name-dropping
Chapman.
everybody.
Yes, where basically they they had like subjects play what's called an ultimatum game. It's a sort of cooperative game where you can get betrayed, and when they receive unfair offers, they hook them up on the MRI and everything. Maybe it wasn't MRI, but somehow they looked at their neurosignatures, and it does actually track what usually goes on when in core disgust. So there's a kind of disgust that is directed at like moral type phenomena. I can give a couple examples of what I think are moral disgust as well, like more contemporary ones. And so here's a recent example that I found. So, I mean, most of you will have seen that the scene in the White House where Trump and Vance ambushed Zelensky. Actually, David Brooks made this comment. I actually noted it down so I could use it here. And he actually said, "I was nauseated, just nauseated. All my life had a certain idea of America that we're a flawed country, but we're fundamentally a force for good in the world." Again, you could question that, but that's what he thinks. And then he says he believes that might makes right. Trump and Putin together are trying to create a world that's safe for gangsters where ruthless people can thrive. Now, whatever you think about that vision of America, I think the quote is quite clear about what Brooks is worried about, right? Not that Trump is doing something wrong or disrespectful, but that he's nauseated because he believes that Trump is corroding and staining a certain normative order centered around particular ideals of American civility and global beneficence. And of course, since we're in a bioethics podcast, there's this very famous article by Leon Kass titled The Wisdom of Repugnance, where he appeals to his moral disgust towards cloning as a source of insight into its wrongness. Kass seems to cast disgust as a sort of mysterious source of revelation. I wouldn't go that far, but I do think that moral disgust carries a certain wisdom. I think if you look at his arguments, again, his worry is that human cloning serves to undermine a particular way of structuring society built around certain practices of child rearing. So yeah, I think that those are some cases of moral disgust.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to start off with an example, which is that, sometimes you have a friend and, they might be like 20 or 21 of legal age.
For the listeners, she's pointing to me for some reason. I am not 20 or 21.
And how old are you?
Older.
400. Anyway.
400.
At
Right.
least 400.
At
Right.
least.
It's his 401st birthday on Friday, so we're actually very
happy
excited.
birthday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're going out for prawns.
Well,
prawns
400
and karaoke.
was the big one. 401, no big
Okay.
deal.
Yeah, that's
Right.
just karaoke.
Right.
Yeah. No celebration at MBS. Anyway, so when you hear those stories of like a 20-year-old that starts dating like a 50-year-old,
Yeah.
and that it's their legal age, they're consenting.
Yeah.
It feels icky. But then, there's this like sort of phenomena, I think, in the sisterhood, which is that you want to support your sisters or your girls, sort of doing, what it is they do.
Again, she's still pointing at me.
Yeah.
James, my notorious sisterhood. And so sometimes I also find myself, like a friend might make a questionable sexual choice.
Yeah.
And you're like, you know what, girl? It's called you do you. And I've termed this you do you ethics, which is where sometimes you'll just sort of excuse your friends from doing things that you would judge other people for. You find it gross and icky. But when they do it, you're like, yeah, no, you go, girl. Like, you get that. You do what you want.
Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to pull out there, though, is that it seems a bit relative. Like my disgust at some random stranger or some random 20-year-old dating like a 50 or a 60-year-old which doesn't arise when my friend does it.
Yeah.
Like it seems a bit relative and subjective. So then how can we draw moral principles or like universal principles about how reliable disgust is in guiding our intuitions?
Yeah, I guess one question to ask is, I guess there are lots of questions to ask.
Honestly, me too.
I guess one is, so do you actually feel the disgust towards what your friend is doing? Or is it like you don't feel disgust towards what your friend is doing, but you feel it when someone else is doing it?
I honestly don't think I feel disgust. I think it's more like empowering. Like, you go, girl.
Yeah.
You know what? Like, society says you can't do this, but you're going to do what you want because, society has held women back for so long and you can make your choice and I'm not going to judge you because I'm a feminist. And then when a stranger does it, I'm like, ugh.
Right. I mean, I guess all sorts of things could be going on as to what explains your repulsion. I mean, so the second question is whether you're actually feeling moral disgust or some other kind of disgust, like core disgust. I guess, I don't know, I think like someone once told me that they found age gap relationships disgusting in any case. And I think it's interesting. I think age gap relationships are, again, I think there are certainly benign cases of that. I think it can get problematic because it's age usually implicated with like power and hierarchy and so on.
So
Obviously
maybe we
that
change
could
the
be-
example to like
yeah.
a 35-year-old and like a 70-year-old.
A 35-year-old and a 70-year-old.
Yeah. Where there's less
Okay, so here's
concerns
an
about
interesting
like
question.
consent because they're still quite young.
Which is the guy?
Yeah,
Or,
excellent
I mean, again,
point.
Yeah, I feel
You
like
know what? We're getting really specific.
I know we're getting very specific, but I think that matters because I have the sense that our discuss might be tracking something moral, and it's tracking these like problematic power dynamics that
So let's
could be
invert
going
it.
on
Let's
in
invert
those.
it and let's make the woman the older one.
Yeah, would you find that disgusting?
No, I probably,
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but
no, probably not.
yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. I wouldn't. Once again, I'd be like, you go, girl. Women in male-dominated fields.
Yeah, so
Being
I mean,
old,
look,
a
that being said,
male-dominated
I do
field.
think that. Look, I do think that. I mean, just it's a bit weird as a guy saying, but obviously women could abuse their positions of power as well.
Yes.
I mean, I think there were like
we've
Justice
made light of
Vita
that.
Ronell case, I think, in philosophy a while back. So, but normally that's not the case. So I do think that we are. So I mean, I think that's interesting, right? It does suggest that our sense of disgust is sensitive to more complex factors than just icky age gap, something simplistic. There are all these sorts of factors that we are taking into account, and I think I share the same intuitions as you. I wouldn't find it as disgusting if it's a 70-year-old woman and a 35-year-old man. Actually, that's like Emmanuel Macron, right? Isn't it? I don't think that's.
I don't think the
Okay,
age
okay.
gap
I know
is
it's not
quite
70 and
that big.
35,
Wait, is that the
but
French president?
it's the French president.
His wife is 70?
Okay, his
Older.
wife is not 70.
Older.
Older.
Yeah.
How old
Is
is
it
he?
really?
Well, I don't know how. No, not older than 70. She's just older than him, by quite a bit.
Okay.
And I think they started dating. Well,
Okay, there are more complications there because she was his teacher.
she was his high school teacher.
Yeah, so there could be a power imbalance there as
Yeah.
well. But obviously, he's the president of the French Republic right now. Like, there's no sense in which there's any more power imbalance. So, like, I
Yeah.
don't think that's.
Yeah.
I wouldn't find that.
So do you think then that our emotions, like disgust, do track reliable intuitions?
So I do think so. I guess here's what I say, which is that the way I think about moral disgust is that it tracks infractions on like the normative structures we care about. Or which normative structures we care about can vary depending on what sort of upbringing, what sort of convictions you have, and that explains the variety. So I think it's important, like piece of information as to when certain sorts of actions might compromise the normative structure you care about. But you still have to ask the question, I guess, like, is this something I should care about? It opens up the space for reflection. But yeah, you might not always want to take it at face value, I guess.
Okay, you are throwing about a fancy term here, and it's normative
What's the-
structure.
Sorry.
Can you break that down for us? Because we kind of know what normative claims are. This is just like claims about what we should and shouldn't do. So is that what you mean by normative structure, or are you talking about something else?
Right. So I mean something more like social norms. So I mean the simplest way to think about it is that like norms of etiquette. That's one normative structure. We take certain things for granted. I used a game example earlier. That when we play, what was the example of sport I used? Soccer, I think. Maybe it was basketball.
The sports ball.
Actually, I think I said football. Which is
You're wrong.
by which I mean soccer because we're in.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, I thought footy.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean soccer. That's what I had in mind when I said.
We've cleared up a lot of things. Like,
Right.
you don't know sports.
I'm a sports guy.
Yeah, so there's some sense in which like because of the motivational sets of the players and everything, and because of like certain sorts of public rules, like these norms are enforced. So I say when I talk about normative structure, I mean something like operative norms, the way things are done around here, the way we actually structure our societies, and that can of course come apart from maybe aspirational norms. So for example, I guess vegetarians they hope that there'd be less meat eating. So in some sense, they take that as a norm. But it's obviously not the operative normative structure. Certainly not in Singapore, where almost everyone is omnivorous. So I'd say the normative structure of like vegetarianism doesn't hold here. It's like more omnivorous here. And yeah, so I think that's what I mean by normative structure. I don't mean what we should do or what we shouldn't do, but what's taken to be the way things are done in a certain group or society.
Okay, so this does sound pretty broad. So are you saying that any act which kind of violates any of the norms held by society at large is something that can be considered disgusting?
Ooh.
So I think that's a great question. I guess there are two things I want to say to that. First, obviously we might not accept all the norms that are operative in society. As I said, it's the ones that we care about. You might think there are certain ways that society structures ourselves that you find regrettable, in which case you actually rejoice when people do things that transgress those norms. I have this point in the paper that even if you think that moral disgust tracks like only the worst sorts of normative structures, it's so important to pay attention because that gives you a clue on how to destroy the normative structures you don't like. I mean, it can be, you think about why so many like liberation movements, they seem to do a lot of transgressive stuff. Maybe it's because they're onto something. I guess the other thing to say, and this is a point that it's a bit more subtle, but I don't think every norm violation, even if the norm is something that you care about, is morally disgusting. I think it has to be a sort of norm violation that somehow like undermines the structure in a deeper, more contaminating way. I mean, just to give you a couple of give you one example, like so strategic fouls in basketball, for example. I mean, that's
Hold on. Do you know what these are, James?
Yeah, a strategic foul is a foul that's strategic.
Anyway, back to you, Brendan.
right. So should I explain what strategic foul is?
He has no idea.
I'm sure he has some idea.
Look, you can kind of put it together by what it by the term, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know what a foul is, and then a strategic foul is a foul that you do to get something else done.
Yeah, so you violate the norms because you want to obtain some kind of strategic advantage, to stall for time, for example, in basketball.
Yeah.
So those are norm violations. I think we do want those norms there, but most people don't really ban eyelid. There's a penalty that's dished out. But that's about it.
Oh, and can be considered unsportsmanlike.
So I think that's the interesting part, right? I think in certain games, they are considered unsportsmanlike, but whereas in others, so this is what I'm talking, again, I should say I'm not really that much of a sports person myself, but I think this is a easy way to look at the example. So I'm told that in basketball, strategic fouls are completely fine, or it's quite broadly accepted. But my sense is that in soccer, people are really unhappy whenever someone tries to do a strategic foul.
We used to get told in basketball, particularly like champ schools and stuff, that like towards the end, to run out the clock, you would intentionally foul them because they're less likely to make the free throw than get a layup.
Yeah, somebody is unlikely to get a free throw if you punch them in the face.
It's not. You don't need that. Oh my goodness! You know very little. You could just literally push them very lightly, and that's a foul because you can't touch them. You could literally just poke them in the ear, and that would be a foul.
Or just since you're there.
Okay, maybe you just got excluded from all sport.
Yep.
Anyway,
I think that's exactly right, and I think the way I explain that difference is that it really has to do with like, I guess the other thing I want to say about these normative structures is that they're not just like a random bunch of rules. They're usually structured around certain sorts of ideals, and I think what seems to be the case about soccer, which might explain why strategic fouls are less tolerated, is that part of the game of soccer, the beauty of soccer is like the flow of the ball from one to another. If you keep committing fouls, that kind of like defeats the whole purpose of the game, which is to display some sort of like beautiful virtuosic goal scoring or something like that. Or at least that seems to be what people who care about soccer seem to care about. Again, I'm not really that much of a sports person, but
it's a great analogy. Yeah. But I think it raises a worry, which is that it shows that the concept of disgusting and like morals can be relative. And so if we take it out of the arbitrary nature of sports, which is where the rules are just sort of made up and you just have to follow them anyway, and we put it into real life, do you get worried though that like what might be disgusting in one culture might not be disgusting in another, even though it's actually wrong and it should be disgusting, or like the other way around?
Right. So that's definitely the case. I mean, there's at least one sense in which like all emotions are subjective or relative, in the sense that like what emotions I feel may not be the same as the emotions you feel. But of course, that's not unique to emotions. Like any of my mental states, what I believe in is not the same as what you believe in. But it doesn't mean that one of us couldn't be right or wrong, or that it's important to pay attention to our beliefs or emotions when we try to figure out these sorts of things. I think the main target of my analysis is really just, it's primarily descriptive. So I'm trying to figure out what are we feeling, like what are we doing, or what are we feeling when we feel more disgust? What are we trying to respond to? And that can come apart as to whether or not we're right in many cases. Obviously, from the first person point of view, when we feel moral disgust, and here I don't think if we feel core disgust, we always necessarily think something is wrong. So I'm usually disgusted by the person who maybe eats my leftovers after I've left the restaurant, but I wouldn't always think that something is wrong. But I do think when it comes to moral disgust, that particular emotion usually comes with at least a thought that something wrong is going on, that not just I should find that wrong, but really anyone in my position would find that wrong. And so that's how it feels from the first person point of view. I do think as well that just as many normative structures, most of them could be reprehensible. Presumably there are some that are worth preserving, in which case there's going to be at least some cases of moral disgust that we should pay attention to, and could be an important tool in those sorts of cases as well.
I'm so glad you said that because I would like to raise a hypothetical case that has been brought to my attention, and I'm just going to give him a shout out here. Blair, thank you for this one, for starting many dinner parties with this one. So my friend Blair has brought up this problem, which is consensual cannibalism wrong, apart from the fact that it's just disgusting? And so it's this, for those of you who are trying to picture this, get this. So essentially, two people could consent, or one person could consent to another person taking a little chonk and having a little munch. I'm trying to make it sound as less disgusting as I can because to me, it's pretty feral. And so he raised the point that as long as they're consenting to it, what's actually apart from the fact that it's just got an ick factor, and is that ick factor enough to translate into like a moral or a legal prohibition, which there currently is?
Yeah.
So how can you try to explain to me how the ick factor is working in this case? Because I don't want to admit it to him, but here I am. I think he has a point.
Right. So I guess, one thing to say is that if you have the sort of moral view that certain sort of libertarian where anything that's consensual is completely fine, you might not think there's an issue there. That being said, I think I would experience moral disgust towards that thought. I guess once you move away from the sort of like pure consensual type view that anything goes as long as everyone consents to it, then you might think that perhaps morality or maybe legal structures, it's permitted for them not just to like regulate voluntary contracts we hold between one another, but certain sorts of ideals or certain sorts of values that we want to uphold as a community. Obviously, if you're a libertarian, one can't care about any of that. Anything thicker than that, I think anyone who's a political theorists would think that there are certain values that we want to preserve as a society that's permissible for the state to impose. And then I guess then the question is, what are the values at stake? And I guess here's the part where I think it's interesting. It's a really interesting question. I think one needs to think about what the relationship is between the body and food. How are we treating the body when we just treat another person's body as if it was a piece of food? What are the attitudes involved? What sorts of attitudes are we expressing? And my hunch, again, I need to think carefully about this case, is that there's some sort of disrespect that's going on, or some sort of disvaluing of the body. And I guess I want to say that the important part is that this way we value the body as a community, precisely because of the way you brought up the case, isn't reduced to our respect for someone's autonomy. If you think that's the case, and I do have the intuition that someone's body matters, it's about someone's dignity or something like that, it's like inalienable, they can't even self-alienate. They can't even alienate themselves from that self-dignity. It's something we should all care about. I suspect that that's perhaps what we're responding to, or maybe what you're responding to when we experience disgust there. Now, you could think all this is an illusion. Obviously, many people, perhaps, I don't know if many people do. I think I'm certainly in the group of the illusion, if it is an illusion. But I think here's one important thing to say, which is, even if you think it's an illusion, it's worth articulating. So just saying that you're just responding to it because it's icky, that sort of stops debate. Actually, I think disgust responds to, we're attuned to certain sorts of ideals, we care about certain sorts of the ways the body is valued. You could dispute that our body should be valued that way. But I think like just saying it's icky, therefore can dismiss what you say. I think that's cutting short our ethical reflection, the much needed ethical reflection in that case.
I do love to use that's just icky as a way to shut down debates that I don't want to be part of anymore.
Yeah, so like what happens then when you talk about it and you think about it a while? And you start out with an intuition that something is disgusting, but then you get to a point where you think about it a bunch and you just cannot think of a good reason to and by good I mean just like something that's supported by moral theory or whatever to think that it's immoral. Another example that I think I encountered, and I think many philosophy undergrad students will encounter this one, is the issue of incest, right? The classic example of a philosophy professor challenging the students, what's wrong with incest? Well, there are a bunch of obvious answers, right? Like the first thing people say is that, there's a chance of deformities. Okay, they use contraception. All right, what's next? All right, and the students will come up with a whole bunch of reasons, but in the end, the philosophy professor usually fairly easily just like knocks all of those reasons down and shows why they don't really work. So what do we do then when we end up at a point where we still feel disgusted by something, but we just cannot think of a good moral reason to think it's wrong?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting case. The incest one. So there's this. I mean, I presume you're referring.
It's
to
another
that,
fun party conversation.
right?
Try it at the next one.
Consensual cannibalism and incest.
Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, many people may know this, but there's a series of experiments run by Jonathan Haidt. It's a phenomenon he calls this moral dumbfounding. A lot of it revolves around disgust. I think he showed students a bunch of cases. The incest is one. I think there's another one where one shits on the American flag. Oh no, they use the American flag to clean the toilet. I don't make any comments about the case because I'm traveling to the US in September, so I wouldn't say anything about that. I'm just pointing out that that's something that's one of the cases that he talks about. I think there's also having sex with a dead chicken and then eating it. Anyway, so it's quite interesting. So let's just go with the incest case. I mean, the way Haidt sets it up is supposed to be that it's completely risk-free. What are their names? I think Mark and Julie, they decide to have sex.
Mark and Julie.
Those freaks.
Yeah, it'll be just a fun
consensual?
experience, completely consensual. They do it once, and hey, they use contraceptives and everything, and it's completely fine. So I think what's interesting is that I think in the experiment, in the study, what happens is that students will give a bunch of reasons. They'll articulate, but isn't it risky and so on, and then the experimenter is apparently. So I think there's actually a problem with the experimental setup for those sorts of experiments. I actually suspect now that what's going on is that Haidt and his colleagues were sort of gaslighting the subjects because they had a certain sort of conception about what counts as a reason, and I think in their minds it has to be harm. But in their minds, they set up the case such that there are no harm-based reasons. Therefore, there cannot possibly be any reasons in which any of the subjects could come up with. It's like the subject would say something, and then Haidt and his colleagues would say, yeah, but they use contraceptives, right? So they sort of grasp, they do have certain reasons, but they're made to feel as though, and then in the end they just say, all right, I just feel disgusted. I actually think that more is going on. I think there's two things to say here. I think there was another study that's done that made this point. I can't remember how they did the study, but the point that was made is that, look, the act was risky. Would you really approve of a bunch of, they say they've used the contraceptive, they say that they did everything they could, and they say that there are no more psychological harms, but surely the act is still going to be risky. And I think that's something that we should be morally responsive to. Obviously, I don't think just because an act is risky means it's disgusting, so there's still a question about what explains the moral disgust. I think in my view, I think part of the reason why we find incest morally disgusting has something to do with again, I think this needs to be unpacked carefully, maybe some sort of anthropological work. Something to do with the role that we think families play in our society. I do think the certain sort of ideal we have of families where it's some sort of shelter from the world, and somehow sex in some ways is one of those things that kind of undermines the sanctity of the family in a certain way. Now, of course, once I say it that way, now this is a reason I could give you an explanation for why I'm responsive to. But you might still ask the question: is this really the ideal that we want to uphold in our society? Is it something we care about? I think it's something we should, but again, you could dispute that. You could think that no, there are lots of people think that families shouldn't be destructive, like families are a source of oppression and so on, so we shouldn't think about families such and such a way. I don't think that's the right way to think about families. I think they're important. Obviously, there's also a question as whether you need to tie this to certain sorts of ways of thinking about sex. But I do think that actually it is possible to articulate what one's moral disgust is responding to in these cases, such that there's some sort of intelligible, coherent structure. I say that's just a starting point, and then we still need to ask ourselves, is this really the structure that we want? Now, you gave me a case. You started with asking me the question about what about the sorts of cases where I just can't articulate what my disgust is responding to. And obviously, going to Haidt, a bunch of his subjects could not articulate, and I think that's actually quite common. Does that mean, therefore, we shouldn't trust our disgust? What should we do then? I think it's very hard to give answers in general. It really depends on the case, I guess, and I guess one thing to say, I think this sort of ethical reflection is best done by talking to people, especially if you feel icky about something. I think that's a good step.
Talk to your friends, your
Talk
family
to your
about
friends
incest.
and your family. Yeah, maybe not your family about. That might make things
Maybe your
strange.
sister. Hey, how do you feel about incest?
Right, yeah. So I wouldn't, yeah.
I hope my sister doesn't listen to this.
Hypothetical question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right. So, sorry, the other point I wanted to make was I think we need to be careful because I think sometimes the reason there can be like more nefarious reasons why people struggle to articulate the reasons why they feel disgust. So I think gaslighting is one possibility. I mean, I think in the paper I do discuss this sort of example where I think this is sort of thing that Miranda Fricker brings up. She coined this term called hermeneutical injustice, where, I mean, a central case is, I think, a couple of decades. Can't remember what the time period she was thinking of again, but there was a time when this concept of sexual harassment hadn't really been clearly formulated. Presumably, many women had a sense that certain sorts of sexual harassment, those were disgusting, they did feel disgusted, but they found it hard to articulate what exactly was wrong. Usually the structures back then were such that the men could just pass it off as, well, I'm just being friendly, why are you overreacting? And so they could, be gaslighted in such a way that they found it hard to articulate what exactly they were responding to, what exactly their emotions were responding to. But clearly there was a form of disrespect. There's something creepy about their behavior. And I think in those cases, I guess we need to be alert to the fact that certain sorts of hermeneutical injustices can cloud our ability to articulate the reasons behind disgust as well. So I think that's another thing to say. So I guess in general, I still wouldn't say you should dismiss your feeling of disgust if you cannot articulate it, but you should be very careful because it can lead you astray as well.
Yeah, and it can also be tied up with other emotions. Like, I think it's a fairly common experience as a woman growing up is that you get sexualized from a very young age.
Right.
And so I do remember, though, like growing up being like 10, 11, 12, and you'd get like wolf whistled from like a car driving past, or someone would say like something particularly nice to you.
Yeah.
And it would feel both gross and nice at the same time.
Yeah.
You would feel good about yourself because you've been socialized to see yourself that way. So you feel like you're fulfilling a particular role.
Yeah.
But then also, depending on who it was that said it to you, could make you more or less disgusted about it.
Right.
And it's so complicated. And it's something I think women still battle with, to this day, is like I both like want it, but also when it happens, I feel repulsed. And it's difficult to reconcile.
Right.
So I agree with you that like moral disgust is something that you need to explore, and you need to ask yourself why. You can't just feel disgusted and be like, yeah, it's just icky. Right.
No, I think that's a great point. So I think actually what you bring out is that in some ways our kind of effective attunement to the social world is really kind of morally ambivalent, because the social world itself is morally ambivalent. I mean, there are all sorts we're attuned to norms that we care about, we want to preserve, like norms of mutual respect and so on. But there can be other persistent effects of the social world that we kind of implicitly accept, maybe certain forms of like harmful patriarchy and so on. Maybe there's not so much moral disgust, but I think like core disgust is very much tied to like our sense of like how we appear, how we look. I think it's quite common growing up that I found myself looking disgusting. I'm sure, I mean, I don't speak for women. I assume that, all teenagers feel that. And some of that sort of like our aesthetic sensibilities, that can be driven by injustice as well. Some of it is unfair, unhelpful, objectifying, sexualizing in unhelpful ways. So that's another reason why we shouldn't take all emotions at face value. But sometimes they can be tuned to the right sorts of norms, and so we shouldn't dismiss them as well.
And sometimes they're really weird. Like, pimple popping is like an ASMR thing on the internet. Like,
I don't know about that, but
okay, welcome to the
internet. Is it supposed to be isn't ASMR supposed to be a sound thing?
Okay, so I'm likening it to ASMR, and that people love to like watch it.
Yeah.
And so there are whole channels dedicated to just watching people pop pimples.
Right.
And it's disgusting and satisfying at the same time. And there's a new trend at the moment, actually, of watching people clean like cow hoofs.
Oh, I've seen those.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was speaking to men about people. Cow hoofs, men. Both Wacky and James are like, yes.
Into them.
But you've seen them.
I've seen them.
And they like slowly shave more and more of it. Yeah. Like the pus comes out and you're like, ew. I'll just keep watching for a bit longer.
Right.
It's so interesting how like things that, are moral disgusting can track things that are objectively morally wrong. But then like what's the other one? The other disgust? Core disgust.
Yeah.
It's fine. Like, if you like watching someone vomit, is there anything intrinsically wrong with that?
Yes.
Why? It's icky. We've learned nothing.
Desiring to watch people vomit?
I've got a question, but it's actually James's question. But I think it's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
And it's people have expressed disgust at things like, and we've talked about it, like incest, but also things like interracial marriage, same-sex relationships, premarital sex, masturbation. Is disgust inherently like morally conservative?
Right. So I think that's a great question. I guess you have to say that there's at least one sense in which disgust is conservative. If you use the classical understanding of conservatism, where conservatism, because of the Burkean sort, is interested in kind of preserving social structures. You don't want them to change. I mean, in some ways, I think that's exactly what moral disgust is marshaled to preserve. But need not be conservative in the sense that it's preserving only conservative structures, because I think lots of liberals, there are structures they want to preserve as well. They think that freedom, democracy, certain ideals of certain ways, particular ways of doing democracy. So I mean, think about it's been called cancel culture. I think a lot of what's powering that is disgust. So I think I know some people use cancel culture as like a bad term, but really I think when the right complains about cancel culture, they're just being hypocritical, because obviously the right does their own share of deplatforming as well. But the point is that I think they both recognize that there are important structures that we need to preserve, and excluding certain people, that's one way of preserving them. There's also this large literature. There's some empirical work that suggests conservatives have higher disgust sensitivity than liberals. But I actually think that a lot of that is also a result of bias measurement tools. So I think usually on these studies, the items on disgust sensitivity scales usually are tied to stuff that only conservatives are mainly disgusted by, like sexual items. And obviously liberals are disgusted by a different set of things. There's a nice paper by Juliette Strenger that develops a more rigorous scale, and she finds that once you use a more rigorous scale, disgust sensitivity is actually not really affected by political orientation. So I wouldn't peg it as a particularly conservative emotion. Yeah.
There you go. And that's all the time we have for today. So thank you, Brandon, for coming here all the way here and talking about disgust.
Yeah, no, it was fun.
That was really fun. Thanks for putting up with our banter about and answering lots of questions about incest. This has been fun for everyone.
But for the record, what is the most disgusting food?
Ooh. And why is it deep dish pizza?
Oh gosh. Let me think about that.
James, what do you think it is?
Man, look, I wrote the deep dish pizza thing, so I'm just going to commit to it.
Okay.
But if I thought about it, I'm sure I'd think of something else. But also there are cultural things here, so I'm not going to say it.
Yeah, I find really, it's interesting. So maybe here's that's another example of cultural stuff. But I find like really gamey foods disgusting. So actually, here's one. I did my PhD in Australia, so I thought I should try kangaroo meat one day. Try kangaroo sausages. I just couldn't stomach them. But
they're gamey.
Yeah, they are gamey. But it's interesting. I think I need to get used to that particular sort of gaminess, because there are lots of other foods here in Singapore, which I think, you can tell me what you feel, Sinead, but I think there are lots of stuff that you might find gamey as well, but I find completely fine.
Well, I love that you direct the kangaroo question towards me, because I did not grow up eating kangaroo. I grew up vegetarian. Right. But for me, it's foods that don't chew well.
Okay.
So things like, I really want to get into it, but I can't, which is bok choy. Because I just struggle to chew it, and then I end up half swallowing it, and then because it's halfway down my throat and still half out, it's just not a fun time.
Okay, yeah.
I also struggle with mochi, because you just can't chew it. It doesn't. Okay. You just end up having to swallow it whole.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So it's like more of a texture thing.
Yeah, a textural thing.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Anyway, great way to summarize that podcast.
Alrighty.
See you around.
Thanks.
See you around.
Thanks for listening to our new podcast. Subscribe online and tune in every first of the month. In the meantime, listen to CBME and you, and be savvy.